I stepped into my backyard, the cool morning air hitting my face as I walked toward the fence. But as soon as I looked up, my feet stopped cold. There, right on the edge of my property, was a brand new pool. It was huge, pristine, and completely out of place. A pool on my land. I blinked several times, hoping it was some sort of mistake, but it was still there. The bright blue water sparkled under the sun, taunting me with its presence. The HOA had done this. I had no doubt in my mind. Ran my fingers through my hair, trying to process what I was seeing. I was a water rights expert, someone who knew the ins and outs of property law like the back of my hand. I'd spent years studying the intricacies of water law and land boundaries, but nothing could have prepared me for this. The HOA, the very organization that was supposed to uphold the rules of our community, had crossed a line they didn't even realize. They built this pool without permission, completely disregarding the legal rights I had to my land. The HOA had always been a thorn in my side. They were controlling, manipulative, and thought they could dictate everything within the neighborhood. What plants to grow, what color to paint your house, and now, apparently, what to do with my land. They had pushed their weight around for far too long. But this was a step too far. They had no idea who they were messing with. I stood at the edge of the pool, my eyes scanning the property line. The water rippled in the sun, but my mind was spinning with the sheer audacity of the HOA. They had done this without my consent, without any notice. I could already see the legal violations stacking up in my head. This wasn't just about a pool, it was about water rights. This pool had been constructed on my land, right on top of what I knew was my water allocation. I had studied every inch of the law surrounding these issues, and the HOA had crossed a line they didn't even know existed. I couldn't just let this slide. But as I turned to face the notice they'd left on my door, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The HOA president's name was at the top. Karen, the woman who had made my life miserable with her constant rules and restrictions. She thought she could just dictate what I could do with my property. It was a challenge, but it also left me torn. Should I escalate this? Should I confront them head on? Or was I better off avoiding the headache, knowing the kind of power they had? I knew what I had to do. They had underestimated me. They had no idea that I wasn't just another homeowner. They had no idea that I had the expertise to take this fight to a level they wouldn't be able to escape from. I walked inside and grabbed my files, my fingers brushing over the legal documents. It was time to play this game by my rules. They had built the pool, but I would make sure it cost them everything. I spent the next few days buried in research, the hours blending together as I pored over legal texts, property records, and water rights laws. My desk became a mess of printouts, highlighted passages, and sticky notes. Every document I pulled up only reinforced what I already knew. The HOA had violated several water rights regulations. The pool wasn't just built on my land without permission. It had been constructed with disregard for water rights laws. The more I learned, the more my anger grew. They hadn't just made a mistake. They had deliberately ignored laws that were in place to protect landowners like me. I contacted several legal experts in water rights, scheduling calls and meeting with lawyers who specialized in property law. Each conversation brought more pieces of the puzzle into focus. Not only had the HOA violated my land rights, but they had also manipulated the zoning laws to make this project happen. The pool was part of a broader plan to alter the water allocations in the entire neighborhood to increase the HOA's control over the water supply. This was no small mistake. It was a carefully calculated move to push their agenda forward. I collected the evidence. I felt a sense of determination, but also fear creeping in. The HOA had the money, the power, and the influence to make things difficult for me. They could retaliate, use their resources to drag me into a prolonged legal battle, or even make my life harder within the community. I wasn't just fighting for my land. I was about to take on an organization that had been operating unchecked for years. The thought of what they could do to me kept me up at night, but it also fueled my resolve. I had spent my career learning the ins and outs of water rights law, and now it was time to put that knowledge to use. As I dug deeper, I uncovered something unexpected. The HOA wasn't just acting recklessly, they were manipulating the system for profit. I found a series of financial transactions that showed how they had been using their control over water rights to inflate property values and secure profitable contracts with construction companies. This wasn't about a simple pool, it was part of a much larger scheme to exploit the neighborhood and its residents. I could feel my pulse quicken as the realization hit me. I wasn't just fighting for my land anymore, I was fighting to expose an entire network of corruption. They had underestimated me, and now I was ready to turn the tables. The tension in the air was thick as I prepared for the confrontation. Every piece of evidence I collected strengthened my case, but I knew that facing the HOA would be more than just presenting facts. It would be a battle of wills, and I had to be ready. The stakes had never been higher. The day of the community meeting finally arrived. My heart pounded as I walked into the crowded hall, the atmosphere heavy with tension. The HOA board sat at the front, their expressions businesslike, though I could tell they weren't prepared for what was about to come. I had gathered my evidence, stacked neatly in folders. Every document, every piece of research was there, ready to expose the truth. I stepped up to the podium, my palms sweaty but my voice steady. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. I'm here today because the HOA has made a mistake. A big one, I began, my voice carrying across the room. You thought you could build a pool on my land without permission. You thought you could get away with violating water rights regulations. But what you didn't know was that I'm not just a homeowner. I'm a water rights expert, and I know exactly what you've done. Karen, the HOA president, leaned forward, her face tight with irritation. She raised her hand, signaling for me to stop. Mr. Carter, we've already addressed this issue. There's no need for theatrics, she said, her voice cold and dismissive. I didn't back down. Theatrics? No, Karen. This is the truth, and it's not just about a pool. It's about your repeated violations of the law. I held up a legal document, the Water Rights Agreement, and slammed it down on the table for everyone to see. This pool is built on my land, without my consent, and it violates water rights laws. The pool was not only unauthorized, but it was constructed in a way that infringes on my property's water allocation. Karen's face turned a shade paler, but she quickly regained composure. You're mistaken, Mr. Carter. The pool was built in the common area, approved by the board. There's no legal violation here. Her tone was a bit shaky now, but she was trying to maintain control. I smiled, a little too smug for my own liking. That's where you're wrong. The pool is on my property, and it's using water from my land. You've manipulated the zoning laws and water rights allocations for your benefit, and I'm here to expose it. You've been exploiting these laws to increase your control over the neighborhood, all while lining your own pockets. The room gasped. A murmur spread through the crowd. I had their attention now. Mr. Carter, this is outrageous, Karen snapped, clearly flustered. You have no proof of any manipulation. We've been following the law. Is that so? I said, pulling out more documents. Here's a series of financial records showing how the HOA has been using its influence to inflate property values by altering water allocations. You've been exploiting water rights to benefit your contractors and increase property values, while the rest of us are left in the dark. I could see the shift in the room as the truth began to sink in. The other board members looked at each other uneasily. Karen was struggling to maintain control, her hands twitching at her sides as I continued to lay out the evidence. This isn't just a pool, I continued, my voice rising with each word. This is part of a much larger scheme, and you've underestimated me. You thought you could get away with this because you thought I didn't know the law, but I'm the one who knows the law. And now, so does everyone else in this room. Karen stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're just trying to make trouble, Mr. Carter. This is a community project, nothing more. Don't you dare call it a community project when it's been built on stolen land, I fired back, my anger rising. You've been manipulating the entire neighborhood, and you've used your position to line your pockets with profits from illegal activities. Well, that ends today. I will make sure you're held accountable. The room was silent now, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. She glanced around the room, realizing she had no way to talk her way out of this. I could feel the power shifting. The HOA was no longer in control of the narrative. I had turned the tide, and the truth was on my side. You've underestimated me, Karen, I said calmly. And now, the community will know exactly what you've been doing. The pool is coming down, and you will pay for your actions. The tension in the room was palpable. Karen's expression faltered, and for the first time I could see her fear. She was losing her grip on the community she had tried so hard to control. And as I stood there, staring her down, I realized something else. This wasn't just about a pool. This was about taking back control from an organization that thought it could manipulate everyone around it. And I was the one who had finally exposed their lies. The days following the meeting were a blur of legal consultations and phone calls, but it was all worth it. The court hearing was set, and as I walked into the courthouse that morning, I could feel the weight of everything I had been fighting for. The HOA had tried to twist the situation, but now it was my turn. The evidence was undeniable, and with the support of the community behind me, we had built a solid case. The moment the judge ruled in our favor, I felt a surge of relief. The HOA was ordered to remove the pool from my property and pay for the damages they had caused. The fine was hefty, and while it couldn't undo the stress they'd put me through, it was a start. The most satisfying part was watching Karen's face as the ruling was read. She was a master manipulator, but in the end, she couldn't twist the law in her favor this time. As I left the courthouse, I took a deep breath. The weight on my shoulders was gone. I had done it. The victory wasn't just about the pool, it was about standing up for what was right, about fighting against an organization that thought it could trample on people's lives without consequences. I had shown the HOA that they couldn't get away with their manipulative tactics. It wasn't easy, and I knew it wasn't over. The HOA still had influence, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. But this was a victory for every person in the neighborhood who had ever felt powerless against their grip. This was a victory for justice. As I walked back through the neighborhood, I couldn't help but notice the small changes. The relieved looks on my neighbors' faces, the subtle nods of approval as I passed. They saw what had happened, and they knew it wasn't just my win. It was ours. The community had come together to expose the truth, and we had made sure that the HOA could never take our rights for granted again. This journey had changed me. I had started as just another homeowner, frustrated and overlooked, but now I was something more. I had become the voice for those who felt they had none. I had learned that standing up for what's right wasn't just about fighting the system. It was about uniting people and making sure they knew they had the power to change things. And that, to me, was the real victory. As I walked through the neighborhood that evening, the sun casting long shadows over the street, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. The pool that had once stood as a symbol of the HOA's control was gone, along with the sense of helplessness that had haunted me. This wasn't just a victory for me, it was a victory for the entire community. The battle for my property rights had been won, but more importantly, we had all come together to stand up for what was right. I passed by my neighbors, who gave me smiles and nods of approval. The usual tension in the air was gone, replaced by a quiet sense of solidarity. We had proven that the HOA couldn't dictate our lives and that, together, we had the power to fight back. I had started this journey with uncertainty, unsure of how much of a difference I could make, but now I knew the truth. Standing up for what's right wasn't just about winning a fight, it was about inspiring others to do the same. As I stood in front of my house, I realized just how far I had come. The weight of the past months had lifted, but I knew that this fight had changed me. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was part of something bigger, a community that had taken control of its future. The victory was sweet, but the true reward was knowing we had taken back our neighborhood. And that was just the beginning.